Yes, my dears, it is that time. Fashion, art, and food. Tell me, you think this is my new look?
Anywhere you go, give it all.
Baby, it is cold outside. Ergo, the scarf, the sweater. I'm about to make myself some hot tea. I just walked in the door from an exhibit at a museum, and that might sound novel, and it kind of is recently. And it's one of my goals for this year is to take fuller advantage of the breadth of art and creativity that you find in Paris. There are over 400 museums in Paris, and they're all pretty exceptional, and they all have permanent collections, and then they're all constantly bringing in new exhibits. And I wanted to share bits and pieces. I just wanted to capture for you my excitement and enthusiasm and sense of feeling alive as a reminder to you to do the things you love to do. Block the time, because I don't know if you're like me, there are all these things that I want to do, right? There are all these things that I think about doing. I'll read an article or I'll see something on Instagram and I go, oh, that would be cool. And then it just disappears into the ether. Like, I have the thought and I don't follow through with the thought. And what I find over and over and over again, but then have to constantly remind myself over and over and over again about, because I always then forget it down the line and have to remember it, is that when I block something on the calendar and I show up for it because it's been blocked on the calendar, I'm so happy for it. Even if in the days leading up to whatever that scheduled thing is, or even like the couple of hours before it, I'm like, oh, I'd rather stay at home. It's so cozy in my apartment. It's too cold outside, or I'm really tired, or you know, or I've got to do my laundry, or like whatever gazillion reasons I have for not stepping outside of my comfort zone or stepping outside of my apartment to do something new, whether it's with other people or whether it's just by myself. I find that there is never a time that I regret having done it. It's like going to the gym. I don't ever regret going to the gym, or I don't ever regret exercising. It's the leading up to part that I detest. It's the getting dressed for it. It's the getting to the place. And it's the same for going to a museum. It's, you know, having to dress in something other than my pajamas. It's getting from my apartment across town. It's finding out where it actually is located. It's going online and getting the ticket, or making the phone call, or asking somebody if they're free and they want to join me, and risking them saying no. You know, it's all those really silly things that you would think that I would have gotten over at like the age of 12, but I haven't. 40 years later, I still have the same hesitations, the same procrastination techniques, the same sense of vulnerability, and yet it is so worth it. So do me a favor this week, today, take a moment, and you can even like pause this and go find a piece of paper, or go pull out your phone, note section or whatever. Take a moment and think about something that you've been wanting to do, or something that you wrote on a Post-it note that you wanted to do and you just haven't scheduled it yet. And schedule it. Buy the frickin' ticket. Block it. Choose the day. Block it on your calendar. Choose the time. And then show up for it. And I promise you, you won't regret it. So, with that said, let me tell you about the exhibits I went to see in the
Artists and the creations that they share are as integral to the life of Paris as a croissant or the Eiffel Tower. And it's not an elitist practice. Here in France, everyone appreciates art. And there are so many different kinds of museums, you'll never get bored. One of my favorites is the Musée d'Orsay. It's in an old train station, right next to the Seine and across the river from the Louvre. And at the moment, there's an exhibit of Signac. And the difference between him and someone like Monet is he was very focused on the juxtaposition of different colors to create the sense of a single color. Like with this guy's pullover, that up close looks like reds and greens, but then from far away gives you the sense of a solid blue. And what I love about this guy is just this ability to up close tell one story and then stepping back give you an entirely different and sumptuous story to just marvel over. And when you think about like how these paintings are created, I kind of put myself into the shoes of the painter and think, okay, if I had a paintbrush and I had a paint palette and these various colors, like how would I get from individual colors to this full story of a still life that makes sense from far away when I'm only working on it up close? It's like that need to constantly move in and step away, move in and step away, which is a great metaphor for life as well, that to not get so lost in the details that you don't see the bigger picture, but to then spend the time going into the details. And that takes me to the next exhibit I went to, which was a fashion exhibit at the Muséum des Arts Décoratifs of Mugler, who unfortunately just died this weekend. This sequin dress, when you get up close, it reminded me of the Signac paintings. That was the only dress, actually, that reminded me of a neo-impressionist painting. The rest of his fashion design is much more sculptural than painterly, and really not at all functional. You can't sit in his designs. You can't really move in his designs. They're about showmanship and artistry. This suit, for example, is really the only piece of clothing in the entire exhibit that I thought, okay, I could wear that. Of course, I have now revealed myself to not be a fashionista. I just kind of believe that clothing should be wearable. But what I have discovered since living in France is an appreciation for haute couture as an art form, not as clothing, but as true artistic expression, as I said, like sculpture. And if you look at it like that, I can totally appreciate this guy. His skill is extraordinary. His ideas, his creativity, his thinking is amazing. I mean, look at this. I love this outfit. Now, would I wear this outfit? Hell no. But can you imagine creating a dress, a tire, that's in fact leather at its base with pieces of rubber on it? I mean, brilliant. But not for my day at the office. Nor exactly is this. Let's come down to earth for a moment and get a bite to eat. Half the fun of a museum day is the journey from one museum to another along the streets of Paris, where I can discover new boulangeries and patisseries and shops and little street corners. And I've already traversed from Rive Gauche to Rive Droite, but now I need to make my way up the hill to Montmartre, to the area near Sacré-Cœur, which is an area I don't visit that often because it's the opposite side of town from where I live. But every time I do go, I realize that I really need to go more often. So on this day, I find myself visiting a museum I've never been to before, a tiny little place called Musée de Montmartre. And seeing an exhibit by an artist I had never heard of before named Dufy, who also uses extraordinary color in his work and incredible illustrative detail. What struck me the most about this exhibit, though, was not so much his work, but the fact that I had never heard of him before, and it made me reflect on the idea of fame. There are so many ways in which we chase fame, and society has given such importance to being famous, to being recognized, to having celebrity. And it's difficult to separate oneself from all of that messaging and focus on the work and the creativity. And what I love being reminded of is that fame is so transient and subjective. Even those who become famous are only famous within a particular context. There is going to be somebody in the world who has never heard of Beyonce. I swear you could find the person. And that means at the same time that you can do your work and you can reach the people for whom your work is going to mean the most. And that's really the most critical piece of the process. And by extension, that gives you freedom to shake things up sometimes, to not always stick with the same style, to get elaborate or to get simple, like these illustrations. This is still Dufy, but it's not the colors, it's just lines, simple lines that tell a whole story, particularly, again, when you step back. And speaking of illustrations, the last exhibit in my tour de force is a special exhibit of Vogue magazine at the Palais Galliera. I loved the display of the covers and found it fascinating that the first covers were in fact illustrations. Photography was not as advanced as it is now, but also what I loved was that the early magazine covers didn't have a bunch of messaging on them. They were just visual and artistic. And then photography came in, and it was still minimal text and mostly visuals. It was only in the 80s, really, that the faces began to dominate covers. And the covers got covered with loud clickbait headlines. But lucky for you, hunger always stops me from philosophical ramblings. So off to get some much needed sustenance, heading with my friend to Hostel Costes in the 8th for some hot tea to warm the fingers and toes, get off the feet, sit in a comfy chair, people watch a bit, and scarf down some scrumptious food. I got the sandwich. My friend got the pavlova.
Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful week. I'll see you next week. And until then, take care of yourself, stay safe, stay healthy. Gros bisous. À plus.
Anywhere you go, give it on.